Okay, welcome to ECR Tools. Following on from our last video on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights 1948, I did mention that we will be moving on to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Now, the importance of this International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, that is the ICCPR, is the fact that that is a legally binding international treaty. So, unlike the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is a non-binding international treaty. It's a declaration, if you should put it that way, and therefore the countries that are signatory to that are not necessarily legally obliged to actually uphold the contents of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was signed on the 16th of December 1948. So following on to protect the rights of individuals and our fundamental human rights and our fundamental freedoms and our right to life and also our right to live without torture and any form of oppression, it was necessary to get the countries to actually get involved in signing a treaty that was legally binding, and therefore led to the birth of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and also the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. And so these are the two aspects of human rights. The first part being the ICCPR, and the second part being the ICESCR, which is the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. There's always been the idea that the ICCPR, being the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, seems to be given more weight than the ICESCR. But today we're just going to be focusing on the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Currently, as it stands, there are 173 countries that have signed to this International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which was also signed in December 1966. But it took 10 years, somewhere on the 23rd of March 1976, for the ICCPR to actually come into force, because that was the time that they got all the nations to basically member nations to ratify the ICCPR. And so the ICCPR is very important because that is the international treaty that protects your right to life, obviously, and to all your political and civil activities. There is also an optional protocol which also was signed and came into force in 1989, but that we are going to deal with that later on. But for now, we will just focus on the ICCPR, which was signed in 1976, ratified in 1976. And so I'm going to begin. It is important that you take notice of the contents as I read it out, the articles, and also the preamble, which is the introduction, the introductory aspect of the ICCPR, which is called the preamble. So I'm going to read that so that you know the background upon which this international treaty was signed. Now, one must also point out that United Kingdom has signed the ICCPR, and so all the articles that are read here, the United Kingdom are bound by law, by international law, to abide to the contents of the article. Ironically, Israel is also a signatory to the ICCPR, and so that makes it very controversial in terms of what is currently happening in the Gaza Strip, and also the fact that maybe the United Nations are probably a little bit selective in the way that they respond to some of these issues, because you have the issue with Russia, Ukraine, where there was that global outcry to basically stop Russia from its aggression on occupying some aspects of Ukraine, and so the same level of how should I say, response, or is also expected in the current situation in the Middle East. And so this is where at the moment it seems that human rights, one doesn't really know if it really works in the way that it should be working, because of its selective nature in the way that it deals with vested interest, and so I'm just going to go on and read this so that you can actually know the contents. So that the preamble states that the state parties to the present covenant, considering that in accordance with the principles proclaimed in the Charter of the United Nations, recognition of inherent dignity and of equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. Recognizing that these rights derive from the inherent dignity of human persons, recognizing that it is in accordance with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the ideal of free human beings enjoying civil and political freedoms, and freedom from fear and want can only be achieved if conditions are created whereby everyone may enjoy his civil and political rights as well as his economic, social, and cultural rights. Considering the obligations of states under the Charter of the United Nations to promote universal respect for and observance of human rights and freedom, realizing that the individual having duties to other individuals and to the community to which he belongs is under a responsibility to strive for the promotion and observance of the rights recognized in the present covenant, agreed upon the following articles. So these are the articles that has been enshrined in the universal, basically the International Covenant on Human, on Civil and Political Rights, which is the ICCPR. And so the ICCPR and the ICESCR, which is the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, these two combined rights basically forms the full body of the protection of human rights, which has been signed by a majority of the probably over 90% of countries in the world. Currently, as it stands at the ICCPR, is 173 countries, including the United Kingdom and Israel. Now, one thing that I'm probably going to sort of talk about after reading this preamble is the fact that you have various schools of thought about human rights. And so there is that idea that human rights is basically given. It's like, the fact that you're born into the human race that you have these rights. And so there are various schools of thought about, the fact that is human rights indeed given at birth, or you need to do a little bit more to be able to claim your rights. And so, if you bear with me, and so Professor Marie Benedict Dembour, in her writing in 2010 on an article about what human rights is, basically points out 4 school of thoughts of human rights. So the thing is that the idea about human rights is that most people think it's natural, that is given. But then you will see that, there, in as much as we have always been thinking that is given, human rights are abused by governments, by institutions, all sorts in different parts of the world. And so then that really makes you question if human rights is indeed given. And this is why Marie Benedict Dembour, professor, talks about the 4 schools of thought of human rights. And basically the first one is the naturalist, that believes that human rights is just given, just the fact that you are born as a human being, that you have those rights. But then we have the deliberative school, which actually indicates that although these rights may be given, if you don't actually put them down in a law and get it signed, then these rights may be abused. Then you also have the protest group, the protest school of thought. These are the group of people that believe that you have to fight for human rights. That is, it will be a bit like the issue with George Floyd. When something, drastic like that happens to an individual, then you see that public outcry or global outcry to fight against this level of oppression. And then you also have the discourse group that basically thinks you can just talk about human rights, and in the process of you talking about it, people become aware of it, and then therefore it then basically slowly changes the situation. And so these are the main 4 school of thoughts. I kind of feel that to go forward in basically looking at the ICCPR, it is necessary to give this sort of background information so that the audience can get that understanding. But in reality, you actually then notice that, for example, those who are the naturalists will probably think, okay, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is kind of all right because it's really widely accepted as a moral standard. And so, yes, most people do accept that as the way forward. But the reality is that the ICCPR then shifts that to the deliberative school of thought, because now you actually get nations of the world to come together to sign this treaty and to make it binding on them, so that when they are actually abusing the rights of their own people, then they could then be referred to this ICCPR as a breach of the rights of those individuals or groups of people. And so that is the deliberative school. Then you have the protest school that will normally come out and fight when basically have protest and to protest against situations where people's rights are being abused. And then obviously you have the deliberative guys, that the discourse guys that will basically talk about it. It is probably, one could say that the combine of all the 4 groups actually works better for human rights. But the most important or the most proactive is actually the deliberative school that actually forces nations to sign treaties to make it binding on them, and also the protest group that will go out there and basically protest and make noise when obviously the rights of the people are being abused. The deliberative school and probably the naturalist, that I see that as a little bit more of a passive approach to human rights, whereby you talk about it diplomatically and in the hope that anything will change. And so this is the sort of background information that is needed to understand. And so the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, although was a declaration and therefore non-binding, somehow it has been sort of very widely accepted globally as the way forward for human rights. So he's got that very strong moral backing, and also it is widely accepted, and it's actually made its way into the general principles of law, which somehow is slowly seeping into customary international law. But in the ICCPR and the IESCR are actually binding international treaties, and therefore more accountable and more enforceable. And so this is the background information. I'm just going to go right into the articles and just read them out. Do pay attention to the contents of the article, because that is what your nation, being the United Kingdom, that is what they have signed for. Many different countries in Africa, say Ghana, Nigeria, countries in the Far East, Malaysia, even China, they've also signed for it. And therefore, it's important that the contents of this article is well noted. So as it is, this ICCPR will probably, we'll make about 3 videos of it to get all the articles in there. In total, let's have a look. Yeah, in total we have 53 articles, and so that may be done in about 3 videos to cover the contents of the ICCPR, and then after that we will then move on to do the ICESCR. Okay, so starting off with the ICCPR, Article 1 says, all people, Article 1, Paragraph 1 says, all peoples have the right of self-determination. By virtue of that right, they freely determine their political status and freely pursue their economic, social, and cultural development. And so you notice that this Article 1.1 of the ICCPR would have been very instrumental in the times of colonial rule. Obviously, this actually came into force in 1976, but come 1966, it had been drafted and been signed by most countries. But then obviously the ratification actually occurred fully in 1976, 23rd of March. But this would have been instrumental for countries that were basically fighting for independence, because Article 1.1 does state that all people have the right of self-determination, and by virtue of that right, they freely determine their political status and freely pursue their economic, social, and cultural development. So Article 1.2 says, all people may, for their own ends, freely dispose of their natural wealth and resources without prejudice to any obligation arising out of international economic cooperation, based upon the principle of mutual benefit and international law. In no case may a people be deprived of their own means of subsistence. And so that Article 1.2 does state that you have the right dispose of your assets according to your own wish. Article 1.3 states that the state parties to the present covenant, including those having responsibility for administration of non-self-governing and trust territories, shall promote the realization of the right of self-determination and shall respect that right in conformity with the provision of the Charter of the United Nations. Once again, this is very relevant to countries that were fighting for independence from colonial rule. And so this is where, once again, the issue with human rights, that the rights are there, but if you don't actually fight for it, or if it's not actually written down and signed, then therefore those rights may be abused. That is, if you're not aware of what your rights are. And so this is why, it's important to make these videos to bring that education to people, and also to take comments and contributions. And so remember to share this video, like it, add your comments, add your contributions. It's a learning curve for all of us and all the audience that are interested. So part 2, article 2. So article 2.1 says that each state party to the present covenant undertakes to respect, to ensure all individuals within its territory and subject to its jurisdiction the rights recognized in the present covenant without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth or other status. So once again, Article 2.1 is very important for the individual. This is the protection that you, the individual, does get. And it basically that you don't suffer anything from any government based on your race, your color, your sex, your language, your religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth or other status. We know that regardless of all that has been stated here, say for example the United Kingdom, basically they've ratified this treaty and therefore bound by this treaty. So by law, nobody can discriminate against you based on your race, color, sex, language, religion, political opinion, and the lot. But we are very much aware that there are times where there is that evidence that people may have been discriminated against based on their color, based on their sexual orientation, based on their language, based on their religion. So this is why you have Article 2.1, and so therefore, if as an individual you feel that your rights are being encroached upon, then surely Article 2.1 ICCPR is basically signed by the United Kingdom and many other nations in the world, and so therefore they will have to answer to that. Article 2.2, where not already provided for by existing legislative or other measures, each state party to the present covenant undertakes to take the necessary steps in accordance with its constitutional process and with the provision of the present covenant to adopt such laws or other measures as may be necessary to give effect to the rights recognized in the present covenant. And so once again, it does enforce upon states to ensure that such rights are delivered to the people within their jurisdiction. Article 2.3 states that state parties to the present covenant shall, under Section A, to ensure that any person whose rights or freedom as herein recognized are violated shall have an effective remedy, notwithstanding that the violation has been committed by persons acting in an official capacity. And so this is very important. Article 2.3, Section A, that states that, let's say a person's right has been abused by an official of a state. A person may have been imprisoned, falsely imprisoned. Then the state has a responsibility to remedy such a situation when obviously it comes to the fore that these sort of punitive acts have been done in a way that is false. And so Article 2.3 Section A is very important when a person has been maybe falsely imprisoned or falsely arrested. Then, you know, the state then have to answer when if they deny you the rights within the country, then surely the international filing into an international court will actually make the state accountable, because they are signatory to such international laws and treaties. So Article 2.3b says, to ensure that any person claiming such a remedy shall have his right thereto determined by competent judiciary, administrative or legislative authority, or by any other competent authority provided for by the legal system of the state, and to develop the possibility of judicial remedy. And so once again, this is very important, that if such accusations are brought against a person, then they duly do have their rights to be heard by a competent judiciary or administrative system or a legislative authority, and to ensure that they have that resources also available to use this judiciary system for remedy. And Article 2.3c says, to ensure that the competent authority shall enforce such remedies when granted. And so there you go. These things are enforceable, and it is the state's responsibility that if such individuals' rights are violated, that the remedy is made, and the remedy made is enforceable. So we move on to ICCPR Article 3. Article 3 states, the state parties to the present covenant undertake to ensure the equal rights of men and women to the enjoyment of all civil and political rights set forth in the present covenant. And so this is a non-discriminatory act or article that men and women must or shall be treated equally in their access to their civil and political rights. Article 4.1 says, in time of public emergency which threatens the lives of the nation and the existence of which is officially proclaimed, the state party to the present covenant may take measures derogating from their obligation under the present covenant to the extent strictly required by the exigency of the situation, provided that such measures are not inconsistent with their other obligation under international law and do not involve discrimination solely on the grounds of race, color, sex, language, religion, and social origin. This article, Article 4.1 of the ICCPR, is like, this is where things to do with COVID, you know, in the times of COVID, where there was a public health problem, then the state somehow uses their, you know, emergency powers. And this is how Boris Johnson was able to put people in the room, or to remain in their houses, and obviously for the protection of the nation, because there was a pandemic. However, as you can see, there was a violation, because when you are basically restricted to stay in your home and then you find that some people are having a party, then surely that is a breach of Article ICCPR Article 4.1. And so this is where, you know, people can get themselves into trouble, because basically the application of the state of emergency is inconsistent, because one part or one section of the people are doing one thing and the other section are asked to do another thing. And so this is where the inconsistency, the breach comes in. And this is why it is important that laws are written down so that they can be referred to when they come into breach. So Article 4.2 says that no derogation from Articles 6, 7, and 8, paragraph 1 and 2, 11, 5, and 15, and 16, and 18 may be made under this provision. Now, I may have to go to read those articles to be able to really understand what is being said. So Article 4.3 says, any state party to the present covenant availing itself of the right of derogation shall immediately inform the other state parties to the present covenant through the intermediary of the Secretary General of the United Nations of the provisions from which it has derogated and of the reasons by which it was actuated. A further communication shall be made through the same intermediary on the date on which it terminates such derogation. So it's to do with, you know, the fact that when you apply these emergency situations to derogate the rights of people, then surely, you know, when the time comes, then you need to basically ensure that once that threat is abated, or then you need to basically restore the normal way of doing things. So thank you once again for watching ICCPR Tools. Remember to like our videos, add your comments and contributions, like and share the video. It's a learning curve, it's an open forum. You know, you come in, say what you think, and you know, we're all here to learn. So until the next volume, which will be volume 2 of the ICCPR, thank you once again for watching ICCPR Tools. Good night.